Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third of the Kennedy Library Forums in this winter season of 2012. For those in the audience whom I have not met, I am Paul Kirk, and before I was privileged to represent you in the United States Senate, I was chairman of the board of the Kennedy Library Foundation for almost 20 years. And it's great to be invited back to introduce someone who, in keeping with the spirit of this institution, has used his professional talents as a private citizen to become a public citizen by his contributions through the years to the enlightenment of the American people. And I'm delighted to see so many of my former colleagues here who devote their time and dedication to advance the mission of the Kennedy Library. Tom Putnam, its director of the library, Tom McNaught, executive director of the Kennedy Library Foundation, and Amy McDonald, who just does a great job in coordinating these forums. And these forums would not take place without the generosity of the sponsors, the lead sponsor of which is Bank of America, also Boston Capital, the Lowell Institute, Raytheon Corporation, the Boston Foundation, and the media partners, the Boston Globe and WBUR. Tonight's forum takes place in what, believe it or not, are still the early innings of a presidential contest. Wouldn't seem so. It's also a time when serious fundamental questions are being raised about the state of our politics and the health of our democracy. The polarized, calculated gridlock of our Congress, the increasing incivility in our public discourse, the unbridled race for ratings and revenues on our airwaves, fueled in large part by the rage and extremism of some hyper-partisan talk show hosts, the unseemly and unlimited amounts of money that flood our political campaigns and destroy democracy's fundamental tenet, one person, one vote, with, by the way, the explicit endorsement of the Supreme Court of the United States. President Kennedy said, "Democracy is never a final achievement. It is a call to an untiring effort." So we all have some work to do. But tonight, in contrast, we gather to celebrate a brighter side of the democratic experiment and to hear from an individual whose entire career has been an untiring effort to improve our democracy. Before introducing Jim Lehrer, I would like to welcome one of his partners at public broadcasting and the facilitator of tonight's conversation, Ray Suarez, a native of Brooklyn, a graduate of NYU with a postgraduate degree in social sciences from the University of Chicago. Ray hosted National Public Radio's Talk of the Nation from 1993 until 1999, when he joined the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer and became senior correspondent. Ray has authored several books while hosting the program Destination Casablanca, covering Latino politics and policy for a national audience. He is currently one of the PBS Newshour's outstanding rotating anchors. He received rave reviews for his interview here last May with President Carter, and by popular demand, he is back this evening, and he'll be here again on President's Day to host the library's conference on the presidency and civil rights, and we thank Ray Suarez for being with us this evening. Thank you, Ray. Thank you. Tension City, on sale in the gift store. Plenty of copies left, and you can have them signed by our distinguished author shortly after the forum this evening. It's a story of, it's a book, one of more than 25 books and plays that have been authored by the prolific Jim Lehrer. It tells the story of presidential debates in modern American history. Many historians would argue that the first televised debate in general elections, Vice President Nixon against Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts, was a critical factor in President Kennedy's election. 16 years went by without a single general election debate in the candidacies for presidency until President Ford agreed to debate former Governor Carter in 1976. Today, general election televised debates between the leading candidates for President of the United States are taken for granted. They are viewed as the most informative voter education forums in today's democratic system. And Patriots fans will excuse me when I say they are the Super Bowl of American politics. It was my privilege to co-found the Commission on Presidential Debates in 1986 and to serve as its co-chairman for more than 20 years. A nonpartisan, nonprofit educational institution, the Commission must be scrupulously neutral. Its trust and credibility are at stake in every decision it makes, with the candidates, with their intense staffs, the competing political parties, the press, and most importantly, with the viewing public. The Commission's criteria for candidates' eligibility to debate, the debate calendar, the venues, the formats, whether candidates stand or sit, live audience or not, are among the decisions that are scrutinized, second-guessed, and frequently litigated. But at the end of the day, the single most consistent factor that enhanced the Commission's trust and credibility and its reputation for fairness has been the conduct of its debate moderators. In 1988, its first year as sponsor of the presidential debates, the Commission chose Jim Lehrer to moderate one of those debates. The choice was not based on Jim's experience as a debate moderator. As far as we knew, he had none. We chose Jim Lehrer because of his evident fairness as a human being and as a civil, dignified, informative broadcast journalist. We wanted someone who would pose what he alone felt were the most important questions facing the nation, and then allow the candidates to enlighten and inform the American public about the most serious choice they would make for the next 4 years. No gotcha journalism, no trying to upstage the president or the would-be president, balanced and reasoned inquiries, managing the time judiciously, changing the topics appropriately, maintaining a sense of humor and dignity, and essentially getting out of the way. 24 years later, we can all look back with pride that Jim Lehrer was chosen to moderate 11 of the Commission's general election debates and is widely regarded as the dean of the moderators. Born in Wichita, Kansas, and raised in Texas, where his mom was a bank clerk and his dad drove a bus and managed a bus station, Jim worked his way through college as a Trailways ticket agent. And I want to tell you something. This night will not be complete if either Ray or any member or some other member of the audience does not ask Jim to give his rendition of the dispatcher's call at that bus depot in Texas.
Deal.
Upon graduation from the University of Missouri School of Journalism, Jim joined the United States Marine Corps and later returned to begin his career in journalism with the Dallas Morning News and the Dallas Times-Herald, where he covered the assassination of President Kennedy. He began work with PBS in 1973 and in 1975 developed and co-anchored the McNeil-Lehrer report, later the McNeil-Lehrer Newshour with Robert McNeil. When Robert left in 1995, the show became the Newshour with Jim Lehrer, and today is known as PBS Newshour. And I would argue that throughout the years, it is the most respected news program on television. American electorate will be forever grateful to Jim Lehrer, and I am honored to have this opportunity to thank him publicly and to welcome him to the Kennedy Library. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Well, Jim, I'm going to assume that you've had occasion, there have been 16 of them, to tune into the Republican presidential debates since they began late in 2011. Have they, either individually or as a group, lived up to what you have in mind for their function, their purpose to be in the process of choosing a president?
Yes. But let me explain. You have to see these, first of all, pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming out on a cold night and to hear Suarez. I mean, the purpose of the primary debates is very different than the purpose of the general election debates. The purpose of all the primary debates was they really got started in 2008. There were 40 of them in 2008. Remember, there were 2 non-incumbents running. This time there have been 18 thus far, and there's still probably another 18 more to go for the Republicans. We'll see what happens. There could be no more. Who knows? But the point of the primary debates is to choose the field, is to cut the field, to wean the field, and not to weed, not wean, weed the field. And God knows they've done that in 2011-12. Just the obvious. Look at when those debates began on the Republican side, Herman Cain was less than a blip. The front runner was Mitt Romney, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Michelle Bachmann was in the top tier. Then suddenly comes Rick Perry. He's leading when he just announces. And suddenly what happens after a few debates? Well, Rick Perry goes from double digits to no digits. Michelle Bachmann goes from double digits to no digits. Herman Cain went from no digits to double digits. And then he had another problem, but not related to the debates. You saw what happened with the reason Newt Gingrich is leading the field more or less right now is solely because of the debates. His whole strategy was a debate strategy. And nobody picked up on that until it was, quote, too late, end quote. And because he had no money to run, he didn't do any retail politicking because he couldn't afford it, didn't buy any advertising, but he knew one thing he has a lot of is self-confidence. And I think that's a neutral, well-established fact. And he knew he was a good debater. So he knew there were going to be a lot of them, so he worked his whole strategy toward those debates, and it's paid off handsomely. And without those debates, can you imagine? I can't, so I'll just speak for myself. I couldn't imagine this field where it is now with the 4 they have left if there hadn't been for those debates. The debates did the weeding, and there's still one more debate to go just in Florida, and who knows what's going to happen after that. That is the point of those debates. Now, the point of the presidential debates. Now, everybody has their own view of that. So when you ask, eventually I'm going to get to your question, Ray. I promise. What I have in mind for those debates for the primary debates. That's what I had in mind, and that's what and everybody had in mind, and that's what's happened. The presidential debates, the general election debates, have a different purpose. Their purpose is, keep in mind, they come in late September, early October. I checked on this when I was writing this book. About 90% of the people, the voters, by the time you get to those debates, around 90% or more of the folks have already made up their minds for whom they're going to vote or are leaning very strongly one way or another. So those general election debates aren't about what people really believe about lock boxes for Social Security and what we should do about Iran or whatever it is, whatever the issue. It's not about issues then. It's about taking the measure of the individuals. And both individuals, or all three in the case when we had Perot in addition to George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, it is, can you imagine this person sitting behind a desk in the Oval Office, making a decision about sending Americans into harm's way, dealing with another 9/11, dealing with another Katrina, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's about, and you want to take the measure of the person you're not supporting as much as the person you are supporting, because that person may end up being the president of your United States as much as the person you're supporting. That's why they're so important, and that's why they're so different. And that's why they are so critical to the final outcome, even though sometimes people say, oh, well, they don't answer the question, or, oh, my God, it isn't this and this and this and this. The fact of the matter is, if they're talking, what's your favorite color? You learn something about somebody as an individual, and that's what it's all about. And I did something recently, not quite like this, but a conversation with Bob Gates, the former Secretary of Defense. And he and I were born in the same hospital in Wichita, Kansas. Isn't that interesting? I was there 10 years early. I prepared a place for him. But anyhow, I asked him, you worked for 8 presidents, Mr. Secretary. What is it that you think people should be looking for? What really matters in deciding for whom to vote and looking ahead looking for a president? He, without a blink, he said, temperament. There's such a thing as presidential temperament. And you can smell it, and you can see it, and you can feel it. And that's what these general election debates are about. By the way, I did ask him, let's go through all 8, and you give me a little ups and downs. And he said, are you crazy? I'm not about to do that. But anyhow, that's my answer to your question, Ray.
So it's that process,
Yeah.
submitting yourself to an unrehearsed,
Yeah.
unscripted period of time that exposes you in a way that makes you naked before the public, gives them a chance to see what they might not otherwise be able to see?
Absolutely. Right here, and it's not too many yards from where we're sitting, at University of Massachusetts, in 2000, there was a debate between Al Gore and George W. Bush, which I moderated. And they had split screens, and when Bush was talking, you could also watch Gore react, and vice versa. And the situation was in a bigger hall than this, and I was facing this, but the candidates would be, like, say, over at this end of the stage. Help me, Paul, I think it's about that distance and that end of the stage, and I would be sitting where Paul is sitting right now, right under, like, looking up at him. But I was the closest one to those 2 candidates. But what happened, as you all know, everybody knows, when George W. Bush was answering one of Gore's questions at the beginning, and then many times after that, Gore would go, you know, like that. And when the thing was over, I was walking out of the hall there at the University of Massachusetts with some of my kids were here with my youngest daughter, Amanda. And we were walking, she said, oh, Dad, that was incredible what Gore did. And I stopped and said, what did Gore do? And she said, well, all that sign and all that. And of course, well-raised child, she was in college, and she said, Dad, that's going to be the story of this debate. And I said, and of course, I missed the whole thing. Because as a debate moderator, I always, without exception, always look only at the person who's talking. Because I don't want to have eye contact with the person who's listening, because that might in some way influence the reaction and whatever, so I completely miss it. But here's a case, Ray, where it wasn't about some people, just like with the first debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. People who listened to that on the radio thought Nixon won. People saw it on television, thought Kennedy won. Well, the same thing with that 2000 debate here at the University of Massachusetts. They thought Gore wiped the floor with George W. Bush, but the people who saw it on television thought different, because they didn't like Al Gore doing that. Had nothing to do with substance, had nothing to do with issues and all of that. And that is what's the key to these, I think, like it or not, People can bitch and moan about it all they want to. That's the reality. You take the measure of the individual.
A lot of the stories that have come out of this debate season so far haven't even been about what the candidates have had to say.
Exactly.
It's been about what the audience has had to say.
Yeah.
Whether it's booing a gay Iraq veteran or cheering the notion of leaving somebody who hasn't chosen to buy health insurance sort of on their own to suffer whatever fate comes their way, or shouting down John King in the recent debate when he asked Newt Gingrich about his marital history. Then NBC chose to take the audience out of it. What do you make of that decision, and what do you make of the effect the audience had on the process up until then?
Well, I have, as Paul Kirk knows, I have very strong views about the role that the audience should play in these debates. And I think they should play zero role. And we... I hereby grant you permission to react.
They're incorrigible.
They're
really,
incorrigible, right? Actually, Paul can help me out on this, but when in 1988, when they first started, there were no rules about what the audience could do and not do. I don't remember the exact timing, but I remember the debate commission through Janet Brown said to me, because I was about to moderate another one, she said, you know, the commission has decided, you know, that this is not work. The participants should not include the audience. They are there. They are invited guests, and they shouldn't be allowed to be turned into a version. It's my term, the Major Bowles amateur hour or something like that. And there are 3 or 4 people in here are going to know what the hell I'm talking about. Old enough to know what I'm talking about. And so Janet said to me, do you think you could shut people up? Try. Tell everybody at the beginning. And I said, yeah. And Paul mentioned in the introduction that I spent some time in the Marine Corps. And so I used the Marine Corps technique. I said, I can't remember when it was, which debate it was when I did it the first time. But in the preliminary, like I stood up in front of like you all, and I said, look, you are not here to participate. You are here to observe. And I was rougher than hell on them. I said, in fact, you know, no hissing, no booing, no laughing, no any noise at all. This is not being done for you. This is being done for the voters of the United States who are trying desperately to determine for whom to vote for President of the United States. And don't get in the way. And here's what I mean, and I really came at him. I said, you know, if you don't do what I say, if you cheer or anything like that, I'm going to stop the debate, and I'm going to take the time. In other words, you're cheering for Billy Bob. I'm going to take the time out of his time. And if you keep doing it, I'm going to stop the debate, and I'm going to turn around and point to you and hold you up to public humiliation in front of, remember, 100 million people are watching. Everybody you've ever known in your life is going to be watching. And then I had one of them, it must have been a George H.W. Bush, or it could have been a George W. Bush debate, but Barbara Bush was sitting on the front row down here. And I was telling everybody all this sort of thing. And then I just spontaneously, without thinking about it, said, Mrs. Bush, would you help me out monitoring the people in the audience? She said, yes. I said, remember this, Paul? I said, would you take names? Yes. Trust me, you could hear a pin drop in that place for 90 minutes. And it became the rule of the land of the general election debates. And very few people, there have been very few incidences since then, not just debates that I've moderated, but debates that different people have moderated, where there have been. And my feeling about it is, and what I think these primary debates I agree with you. They have influenced the outcome. And I don't think that's, I think that's not what the purpose. I see them this way. This is not televising an event. This is televising a debate. In other words, it would be perfectly fine. Okay, everybody come to come here to the JFK Library, and everybody get together, and we're going to have a couple of candidates, and we're going to televise that event. You all debating in front of all of you at the JFK Library. That's not what it's about. It's about debating in front of all of the American people. And it seems like a small thing, but I think that it really, really, and you could tell. I mean, Ray and I talked about this earlier. You could tell in the Brian Williams debate, the last one, where the candidates instinctively went for applause lines, and there was no applause. They didn't know what the hell to do with themselves. And but now I understand. Did you read the thing that they're now, the next one, which I think is tomorrow night? CNN's going to open it up again to let the audience participate. And Gingrich has raised Cain about it, said it's a violation of whatever. You know, I mean, he's going to always turn on that's his technique. That's one of his ways. Is to, you know, I mean, look, the elite media is right up there with Al Qaeda in terms of the enemy. So he's using that as well.
When they're working,
Yeah.
when things are going right, when the two candidates are in the zone, what's the hallmarks? When you're sitting there, and you've been through this more than any single person, what's going right that you can say, good, this is living up to why I do this?
At the risk of sounding like a Texas politician, that's a terrific question. My ideal moments in these debates is when you've got two candidates talking about the same thing in a way that is accessible, that is real, that reeks of credibility, and there is a genuine back and forth. It may not be a back and forth of people looking at each other and asking each other questions, but here's the issue, here's what Sammy Sue believes, and here's what Billy Bob believes, and you feel that, in my case, as any moderator, doing your homework is critical for a moderator, obviously, but not so you can write fancy questions. Anybody can sit and write questions, but you do your homework so you can be relaxed enough to listen to the answers. You know, I have this in a book, a thing I say in speeches all the time, that it's never happened exactly this way, where you're interviewing a senator, you say, Senator Kirk, see, I'm just making this up, okay, Paul? Senator Kirk, no, it's a bad example. I won't say Senator Kirk. Senator Smith, do you think we should sell more grain to Cuba? Yes, Jim, I think we should sell more grain to Cuba. But before we do that, we should bomb Havana. And then I come through quickly with a follow-up, what kind of grain, Senator? Shoot! You know, it was so because that was my next question, you see? And so you have to be relaxed enough in these kind of debates, or anything, any kind of interview, but particularly these debates. You have to have done your homework well enough to be able to listen to what is said and pick up a nuanced thing, or the fact that he or she didn't answer it, and then you decide how you're going to follow up, and can you follow up under the rules, how you use the rules to get from here to there. And it is the moments, the glory moments for me are, I don't mean glory about me or for me, but when I really feel, my God, this is it, are those times when there's just, and there have been several times, particularly during the 2004, the John Kerry, George W. Bush debate in Coral Gables, technically Coral Gables, called the Miami debate, where it was post 9/11. Iraq, the Iraq War was on, and there's some legitimate, some very strong differences, and I thought each one of them articulated their positions in a way that made me feel good, and we had some very strict rules, you remember, Paul, and I used them. I thought I was very proud of myself because I used them effectively to get where I wanted to go in terms of the exchanges. I don't mean editorially where I wanted to go, but just to make sure that everything was covered. And what you cannot do, Ray, at least I'm speaking only for myself, is what I never want to do. I never ever sat down and began a debate with any kind of editorial end result in mind, or sitting there to judge, well, Billy Bob's doing a hell of a lot better than Sammy Sue is. If you get your head cluttered up with anything other than, for instance, I tell the story in this book as well. It was 2008, my first debate, and George W. Bush and Michael Dukakis. And the time cues, Mr. Kirk and his folks came up with a brilliant system for time cues. They had 3 light bulbs. One of them was green, one of them was yellow, and one of them was red. And there were 3 sets of them. One in front of each of the 2 cameras for the candidates, so when the candidates looked at it, they would see them, and another identical one on the table in front of the moderator. And for reasons I still to this day cannot explain, George H.W. Bush was giving an answer. He's right in the middle of the answer, and I stopped him. I said, he was vice president at the time. I said, Mr. Vice President, I'm sorry, your time is up. And he points at the camera where the lights are. No, hey, I've still got some time. Well, you know, the moderator has a little earpiece where the producer can talk to the moderator, and I heard this soft voice of the producer say, "He's right, Jim." So I said, oh, Mr. Vice President, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right. You go ahead, sir. He looked at me and he said, I forgot what I was going to say. And you talk about the thing about, I wanted to drop into a big hole because the 100 million people included everybody I'd been in Sunday school with, everybody I'd been in the Marine Corps with, and you know, to this day, I don't know how in the world could I have missed the color of the lights. I still don't know. I'm not colorblind. I don't know why. I just had a mind freeze of some kind. But the only reason I'm telling you the story is that I'm not colorblind, and I do this kind of stuff, and the best intentions, but there things are going to go wrong, and that's why you can't clutter it up with other things that are extraneous. And that's why I try my best to keep anything that would in any way get in the way of my thinking during a debate just out of there. So all I'm doing is trying to get this thing from here to there. And I must tell you, my experience has been, Ray, that suddenly you say good evening from Wawa Center and the Wawa thing, and here's Billy Bob and there's Sammy Sue, and then you start, and then the next thing you know, it's over. It just goes like that. And when it's over, it's exhilarating. Getting into it, it's tension city. And at times, when I screw up, or if somebody screws up, it's even more tension city.
Well, you mentioned that you don't think about whether candidate A is doing better or worse than candidate B.
Right.
But what about the overall thing? Have there been points where you've thought, this is unraveling, this isn't going right? Maybe they're not playing by the rules. Maybe they're not living within the spirit of what we've laid out and they both agreed to. And this has to be set back on the rails. Have there been times when it's just felt like it wasn't going well? Apart from what the 2 guys had to say.
Yeah. Well, another brilliant question.
Oh, thank you.
Well, there were 2 or 3 times when this was in 92, 3-way, Perot, Clinton, Papa Bush, in East Lansing, Michigan. And an experiment was tried where it used to be just, you know, the moderator and 3 panelists. That's what the Kennedy-Nixon and all the other debates up till this that's what they were. And the experiment was that 45 minutes of this 90-minute debate would be the traditional moderator, 3 panels. But the first 45 minutes would be kind of wide open, sole moderator, and I was the sole moderator. And the rules, and I'm not sure everybody picked up on it. I don't know, Paul may have a view on this. I had the impression that once we got started, not everybody realized what the rules were. And at any rate, it got started between Clinton and I asked a question about Clinton and then George H.W. And they got back. They were going back and forth, and for a moment or so, Ross Perot thought a little bit longer than a moment or so. Perot wasn't being heard from, and he was looking at me, and I realized that I had a problem on my hands because the thing between Bush and Clinton was going really well. And I thought it was moving. It was terrific, and Perot was ready to pounce, and so I thought I had to do something. So I said, "Mr. Perot, coming right to you, just in front of everybody, of course." I said, "We're coming right at you, just here in just a moment." He said, "Well, I thought you'd forgotten I was there," or something like that. And then he started to say something else. And that's where I learned what I have learned doing live television as long as I've been doing it, and that is how to shut somebody up with your body language, and to reassure somebody in your body language. And I looked at Perot, who I knew as a reporter. You know, I didn't know him personally, but I knew him professionally in Texas. I looked at him and I said with my eyes and my body, "Relax, Ross, I am not going to let you be mistreated." And he could tell. I mean, it's weird. I talked to him about it afterward. He understood what I was saying to him. I'm going to take care of you, don't worry. And we finished the thing, and I did do it, and everything was fine afterward. And he did tell me afterward, he said, "Well, I saw the way you looked at me, and I knew you weren't going to let me down. And but you can't do that if you haven't had that kind of, you know, anyhow." And there were some other occasions where I thought that not that I'd lost control or anything like that, but things weren't going. For instance, the most recent 2008 McCain-Obama, the first debate, the commission decided, and the candidates agreed that there was going to be that the candidates could talk directly to each other, could question each other, and I was encouraged by the commission to encourage it. Well, as you can see, I made a fool of myself doing it. You know, I would ask, you know, a question, and McCain would answer it, and then I would say, "Well, say that to Senator Obama." And McCain wouldn't even look at Obama, much less address him. And I would do it with Obama, and Obama would, you know, he'd look right at McCain, call him John and all that, and McCain wouldn't even look at him. And I kept doing it, you know, and finally McCain said, I said, "Would you say that again, you know, directly to the senator, to Senator Obama?" And he said, "What's the problem, Jim? You think people can't hear me?" I said, "Well, to hell with that experiment." But I felt when it was over with, that I was disappointed, because I thought an opportunity to kind of loosen things up, I was not able, and it was my fault. For some reason, I just couldn't get it unfrozen. At least and it takes two to play that game. It hurt McCain. That's another one of those 2000, also 60 things. A lot of people thought, "Oh my God," didn't like McCain's attitude. And at that stage in a campaign, it doesn't take much in terms of your perception of an individual. And he thought he came over as testy and angry just because he wouldn't do this. And also, I quit pushing it because of that. I thought, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm getting in the way here, and that's not my job. I laid out the case. He isn't going to do it. Forget it." And anyhow.
Well, you've made a very credible case for an active moderator and a very credible case for an almost standoffish one who only intervenes when things are going wrong. And in addition to the presidential debates, you've written about the debate between Ross Perot and Al Gore over NAFTA.
Yeah.
And said that it was unfair that Larry King got the criticism he did after that debate. King did exactly what a moderator should do, you write. Leave it to the combatants and stay out of it as much as possible. Absent is sometimes the best thing to be.
I believe that with all my heart and soul.
Have candidates after the fact been mad at you?
Oh, never.
I was curious about that, just thought I'd ask.
Because you cleared it up. McCain, I think, is still annoyed with me. My own personal view here, and I've not expressed this until this very moment. Paul may know more about this than I do, but my impression is there in the stage as I was anxiously trying to get this thing going, that somehow McCain either didn't hear or didn't pay attention to what the rules were. In other words, that somehow he didn't know that this was a deal that was supposed to be done. In other words, the direct questioning and all of that, and that he wasn't one way or another, he wasn't party to the experiment. But of course, all that had been negotiated, all that had been agreed, all that was in writing. But somehow, for instance, George H.W. Bush in 1992, he clearly didn't know what that was all about when he did that town hall meeting. I mean, he was stunned when he walked in there and all these people were going to ask him questions. Well, that's the problem with leaving some of these things to handlers. It just doesn't get to the candidate and all of that. But there's no alternative to that, because the candidate isn't going to sit down and negotiate the little things here. But then once it's negotiated, then it's up to the handlers, the assistants, to make sure the candidate understands what the hell the rules are and everybody's agreed to it.
More on the role of the moderator. You write a great deal about Bernie Shaw's famous or perhaps infamous question to Michael Dukakis during their debates about whether he would change his policy toward capital punishment if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered. It's often cited as a turning point in that campaign, and Bernie Shaw has taken a lot of criticism over the years following that debate. Where does that fit in your idea of the ideal role of the moderator? Did he call too much attention to himself by the asking of the question? Was it a fair question? Did you come to any wisdom about that over the now, wow, it's hard to believe, 24 years since that debate?
Well, I think I'm going to dodge that one.
Okay.
I wrote about it extensively in the book, and I gave all sides on it. Bernie himself, I asked him if he had any second thoughts about it. He said, I don't even have any first thoughts about it. He thought it was a fair question then. He still does. I talked to Dukakis. One of the great opportunities I had, and this is also in this book, a major part of the book, in fact, is less about me than it is about the, in addition to being able to do the debates, I also had the rare privilege, and I mean rare and privilege, but underline both those words, that over a period of 20 years to sit down one-on-one with just about all of the candidates for president and vice president who participated in one of these televised debates. And so Dukakis was one of them. And Dukakis, by the way, I'm just sitting here. You realize that how many people that we've discussed who've been involved in presidential elections and presidential debates who are from Massachusetts? How do you explain that, Ray?
Some even admit it, Jim. I think there's one guy out there right now who doesn't bring up Massachusetts much, but he may be familiar to all of you.
But it just occurred to me, you go through them all. Anyhow, Dukakis, back to your question. Dukakis told me that, hey, look, everybody makes mistakes. I made a mistake. You have to look, he said, I look back at the tape then, I've looked back at the tape since, and it was probably a mistake. But he said, he put it into context. He said, look, I have been in public life for years. I've been the governor of Massachusetts. I'd run all kinds. Remember, I used to run a discussion television program on PBS, WGBH at Faneuil Hall. And what was that called? The Advocates, yeah. So he'd been involved in public issues. He said, I've had one strong position, anti-capital punishment, all my professional career. And he said, I saw that, when that question, I just heard that as an issue question. And just another way to ask an issue question. And I didn't see it as in emotional terms. And he said, all I would have had to have done, and I agree with him, all he'd had to have done is, oh my God, if I had my way, I would strangle with my bare hands the person who did that to my kitty. But I wouldn't do that because, and then he could have done his thing about capital. You know, it would have been fine, and it wouldn't have made any difference at all. The other thing is, it's just these things like this that affect the outcome of a presidential debate or the people's minds about a candidate. Bill Clinton, well, anyhow, for instance, in George H.W. Bush's case, another famous one was when George H.W. Bush looked at his watch. Remember that? It was in a, you know, it was a three-way, Perot, Clinton, and all of that. And when I talked to, it's my favorite of all my interviews with all these candidates was with George H.W. Bush, about 7 years after he left the White House. And it was at his presidential library in College Station. It was for television. I mean, there was like Ray and I were sitting here, Bush and I, be a TV camera there and a TV camera taping. This wasn't live or anything. It was for a documentary that we were doing on presidential debates. And I asked him some hard-hitting question like, what was that watch thing all about, Mr. President? And he kind of almost leapt at me. He said, yeah. I'm paraphrasing, but not much. He said, yeah, hey, anybody who looks at his watch during a presidential debate clearly is not qualified to be president of the United States. And so I said,
You think he had thought about it a
yeah,
little
he
bit?
thought about it.
Yeah.
That's what they said, that's what they said. So I said, I waited till he calmed down a second, and I said, well, Mr. President, some people said, well, it showed that that you were bored, you were waiting, you wanted to make this, you wanted the debate to be over. And he said, you're damn right. I wanted to know when this crap was going to be over. And then he said to me, pointing at me, he said, Jim, and you can put that in your documentary. And of course, I said, Mr. President, we just did. But Bill, the best thing that was said in my interviews, Bill Clinton, was when I talked to Bill Clinton. If Bill Clinton had his way, we'd still be talking about these presidential debates. I mean, shop talk. I mean, to him, I mean, he was the guy who gave us the straightest answers and whatever. I'll tell you about all that in a minute if you want. But at any rate, he talked about the watch thing, and which is the same thing with and Dukakis. He said a thing like the watch thing. He said if he, Clinton, or Perot had looked, he said if I'd looked at my watch or Perot had looked at my watch, meaning speaking about himself, nobody paid any attention at all. The reason it mattered is because it fulfilled something that was already in the air about George H.W. Oh, well, he's distracted. He couldn't handle a scanner in a grocery store thing. Yeah, he's disconnected from the American people. Dukakis, going in, he was a cold fish, no emotion. His answer fed the perception. And Gore, with his sign and all of that, why it became so important is because people kind of didn't like him that much. Compared, George W. Bush was the good guy, guy you want to have, pleasant to be around kind of thing. And so, as Clinton said, those things, those little things only matter, only hurt if they fulfill something that's already there. Clinton, let me just say one quick thing about Clinton. When I tell you he was straight as an arrow about this. I asked everyone, including Ronald Reagan. I asked Ronald Reagan about the one-liners, Remember Oh, there you go again. The thing he did with Mondale, I'm not going to use his youthfulness as against all that kind of stuff. And I said to President Reagan, here again, he was out of the White House maybe 5, 6 years when I asked him this. And he said, oh, no, that's all spontaneous, just off the top of my head. Lloyd Benson, who
As was that line he was saying to you.
Yeah, exactly. Lloyd Benson's "You're no Jack Kennedy," et cetera, et cetera. Benson was ill. He had a stroke. By the time I got around the end, I couldn't interview. I wasn't able to interview Benson, but I talked to a lot of people who had interviewed him, and looked at the record. And Benson also claimed that this was just off the top of his head. Well, I also talked to some other people who worked for Benson, and they loved Benson, but some of the people who did debate prep said, well, when they're in rehearsals, somebody they knew that Dan Quayle had said this many times, because remember, the rap on Quayle wasn't experienced enough to be Vice President of the United States, and Quayle's answer, he'd said it many times. Hey, I have more experience now than John F. Kennedy did when he was elected president. So everybody knew he was saying. So one of Benson's guys said, Quayle's saying that. You might want to think about saying, hey, you're no Jack Kennedy. And so anyhow, when I asked Clinton, I said, did you, these one-liners, I said, did you, on your many debates, did you prepare one? Oh, yeah, we had all kinds of one-liners. And he said, well, I tried to work them in the best I could. I mean, it was, and everybody else, without exception, denied there was anything prepared in advance. But not because Clinton saw this. I mean, it'd be like, I come out of the bus business. It'd be like talking to a bus driver about diesel fuel or something like that. Talking to Clinton was like talking. But all these folks, I had a great experience talking to all of them because they're all professional politicians. You don't get to be the nominee for President of the United States or Vice President of the United States without having gone through a lot of tests. And
but
these are pros.
They are very, very different men and women. And I think, as you say, some of that comes out during that extended time. And I'm wondering, I know a little bit about your process. I've seen it up close. I've been walking down your part of the vast McNeil Lehrer Productions complex when the door is closed in the middle of the day and everybody says, they're doing debate in there. Don't go in there, and that kind of stuff. And I've talked to some of these men about the process. And it sounds, for all the world, like you'd rather have root canal, frankly, between anticipating what the other guy is going to say, figuring out what you're going to say, having somebody run you through it, playing the other guy, and on and on and on. It doesn't sound like fun. There's a little bit of upside and a lot of downside. Did anybody in all of this come through, and I think you got to it with Bill Clinton a little bit, as if they liked this part of the process?
Not one of them. Clinton was the only exception. George W. Bush said he thought they were worthy and good for the process, and he was in favor. George H.W. Bush said, I hate those things. I asked him, should they be required? Hell no, they shouldn't be required. And I said, he said, it should be up to each candidate to decide whether they're going to have debates. And he said, you may not like it, debate lovers. He was kind of looking at me going like this, all the other ones, Gerald Ford, remember, it was interesting, Paul, in your introduction. The fact is, it was Ford who challenged Carter to a debate because he was 20 points behind in the polls. Ford was. And the only way, that's what he said to me at least, he said the only way I could figure out that I could cut that margin was to get Jimmy Carter to agree to debate me. So he issued the challenge. And very unusual, of course, he was an incumbent. But because of the pardoning of Nixon and all of that, he was way out of there. And he claims that he would never, and he did close the gap, and he thinks it's because. Then of course he blew it in in that one debate about he freed the folks in Eastern Europe from Soviet domination and all that. But what was your question?
Whether anybody enjoyed it.
Oh, whether anybody enjoyed it. He told me, Ford told me that he enjoyed it until he screwed it up. You know, Jimmy Carter did not enjoy debating. He felt he did. He knew he wasn't. That wasn't his strength, so he didn't enjoy doing it that much. As I told George H.W. hated it. Dukakis was very good at it. You know, he was a really good debater. And George H.W. Bush thought that he was reluctant to debate Dukakis, but I mean he did it, and because he had to. If he had his way, he wouldn't have, because he thought because Dukakis' experience, particularly on television, all the other things, and it turned out just the opposite. I'm just trying to think of some of the Quayle, Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp, Jack Kemp was, you know, what everybody thinks about him politically. Jack Kemp was a gregarious, accessible, fun guy, and he thought, to him, when I talked to him, it's like, you know, it's like talking about it, you know, a game with the Bills against the Patriots. Are the Patriots still? Yeah, you're right. They're still, yeah.
They used to be called the Boston Patriots.
They did.
When they played here in the city. Now they're
well,
some other place, I think.
It's Fox something? What is that? Where's their stadium? Fox?
Yeah.
But,
I don't know. I don't.
It must be. Does Fox Television own that stadium? He's at Brooklyn. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Anyhow, I wouldn't say any of them enjoyed it, but all of them enjoyed it when they thought they won, you know. But getting ready, it was. Ronald Reagan told me. Ronald Reagan thought it was all baloney. He really he screwed up that first debate with Mondale. He said because all the people were telling him all the things, you know, if this guy says this, you know, that he over-prepared. And he said he enjoyed the second debate where that's when he gave the line to Mondale, you know, about
I won't make an issue out of my opponent's relative youth and inexperience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so Reagan said he loved doing that. I mean, he loved all of that. But for the most part, you've got it absolutely right. I mean, there's no way to enjoy that. And you know, these candidates, the preparation is so intense because it so much is at stake. I mean, just the things we've talked about. I mean, somebody's going to say, "Don't look at your watch." You know, Richard Nixon said in his, I've got quoted in my book, in his memoir, said about that first debate, clearly I spent too much time worrying about what I was going to say and not enough about what I looked like. And so they have to worry about that too. They have to, as you say, it is with knowing that you can make one small error either in body language or spoken language and lose the presidency of the United States, that'd keep anybody up a little nervous. Don't you think?
Well, Gerald Ford is people make fun of him, but he was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
And he came to the Congress at the beginning of the Cold War, part of that World War II generation of young congressmen. Nobody for a second thought that he didn't think Poland was under Soviet domination. He misspoke, and then when given an opportunity to revise his comment, he said it the same way again. And, I mean, does anybody think Gerald Ford didn't know that there were Soviet tanks in Russia, in Poland? But it hurt him.
And it hurt him, it would hurt him for two reasons. Remember, Jimmy Carter had had no foreign policy or military or national security experience at all. He'd been the governor of Georgia. So the Carter he felt he was always at a disadvantage and was reluctant to even accept the challenge from Ford because of that, because he thought Ford would wipe the floor with him about foreign policy and all of that. And lo and behold, it was Ford who made the mistake on foreign policy. But that mistake, I agree with you. Nobody thought he really, and he told me that himself. Ford said there were 3 more words if I had put in there. Nobody had thought anything about it. And they just didn't come to me, and I didn't realize it. And Jimmy Carter said he knew right then when Ford said that Ford had made a terrible mistake. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, that's what he said. I'll leave it at that.
It must be a daunting thing to know that if you make what would otherwise be an inconsequential error, that you can lose the whole game.
Yes, and you can transfer that and not put too heavy spin on it. The moderator also realizes that he or she can make a mistake, and an inadvertent mistake, for whatever reason, and you could cost one of the candidates the debate, and thus the presidency. And that there's never been a moment after I've been asked to do a particular debate, that I don't have that in the forefront and the back front and the side front in my mind all the time. And it's a critical thing that keeps everybody in Tension City.
Well, we're still a couple of months away. We don't know who the candidates are going to be. We don't know the dates of the debates, the locations, the moderators, nothing. But we know that there will be some. What advice would you give them as they prepare to do this pretty important civic sacrament, you might say?
How do you handle editing?
I'm actually very easy to edit, I think.
Okay. Now then, would you handle, you don't object to editing?
Not at all.
Okay.
Everybody needs editors.
Okay. One of the 2 candidates is already known.
Yes.
All right. All 4 of the places for the debates have already been selected. So other than that...
No, but they're not wide. They're not known in this audience.
I'll
put that in the footnotes.
See, he doesn't handle criticism well at all. Editing at all.
I'm melting down in front of these people.
Yeah, right. You're talking about advice to candidates?
The future moderators.
Or moderators. Well, there's only one piece of advice, and it's critical. And I've said it over and over again to myself, and say it to anybody who ever thinks about moderating, is it's never about the moderator. If somebody thinks, oh, guys, I can moderate a presidential debate, and if I really do well, then I can get a better job. Oh my God, if I can really do well, if I can call attention to myself, I can get on the Tonight Show. Or if I can do that, I'll sell my books better. Or, it is, forget the politics. I'm assuming that there would never be anybody asked to moderate one of these debates who had any tinge or any inclination to anything to try to influence the outcome of any. What moderators have to guard against is the natural tendency to, let's face it. Somebody says to me, and I'm sure they say it to you, oh my God, I'll just forget it you. I'll just say me. I know this people say this, oh, Jim, you seem so laid back and so unassuming and modest. And I say, hey, give me a break. Nobody appears on live television 5 nights a week for 36 years who is modest, laid back, and whatever. It just doesn't go that way. So
I'll attest to that.
So drawing attention to yourself before people goes with the territory of doing what people like Suarez does for a living. And so at any rate, what you have to do, a moderator has to fight that, and fight that and say, wait a minute, this is no man's ego land. This isn't, and I've said this a million times, and I really do mean it. I mean it with all my heart and soul. This is not some phony thing. If after any debate that I have done, if people are talking about me and some question I have asked, even if they're compliment, great question, Jim, great question, you know, you do it, makes me nervous because they shouldn't, it isn't about the moderator. It's not about the questions, it's about the answers. Answers are devised for one reason and one reason only, and that's to get answers from candidates. It's not to show how tough you are. Oh my God, you really got Billy Bob with that. I don't want to hear that. Anybody who says that to a moderator, that means that moderator screwed up, because that's not what it's about. And so anyhow, advice, sit in front of a mirror and just say, it is not about me. It is not about me, and do it over and over again to where it just becomes natural to say that. And so it becomes, when you have to almost, the other part of it is you have to kind of put aside your journalism hat. Because running a debate on the NewsHour, say, where you've got Sammy Sue and a Billy Bob, you might introduce different subjects. You might do it entirely differently. I have my own, here again, I'm not suggesting that everybody do it my way. I'm just telling you how I did it. I had my own private thing that I've never really shared with anybody until I put it in the book, is that I'm a big believer in not introducing new subjects in a presidential debate in the fall of a general election. I think the debates are about what the campaign has already been about, and not to suddenly, okay, let's open up, Billy, let's talk more about foreign affairs. All right, let's go through some questions on foreign affairs. All right, let's start. Who is the foreign minister of Uzbekistan? That, to me, is cheap shotism and that kind of stuff. Talk about what is already there, what is already separating these candidates and what people have been talking about. And so anyhow, so that's I have a lot of advice. People may or may not take.
Well, now I'm going to take a look at this gorgeous audience, who I haven't been able to see yet. Oh,
They're
there
wonderful
you are.
looking.
Yeah. And there are microphones in these two aisles. We'd love your questions. And while you're making your way to those microphones, please thank Jim Lehrer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot. I should have said this before. I have guidelines for questions from the audience, and I should have told you at the beginning, so you wouldn't waste a lot of time coming up with questions that weren't going to be. I have two guidelines. One, I am not a pundit. Okay. Number two, just like Ray, I don't handle criticism well. So you still want to ask? Go ahead, Ray.
Sir, go ahead.
Yes, on the John King moderation of the Gingrich-Romney, when they asked Gingrich about his marital affairs or whatever, was there a follow-up question to that? I didn't catch it. All I caught was Gingrich's answer, which I thought was combative, but John King seemed to take it very surprisingly, didn't show any emotion whatsoever.
Right.
Did John King act properly?
Well, did John King do what? Did he
act properly, and should he have had a follow-up question?
Should he had a follow-up? Oh, I don't know. I don't know if he needed a follow-up. I don't know what the follow-up. What he did, he got his head handed to him by Gingrich. So he could do one of two things. He tried to kind of defend himself, which was my opinion was a mistake. You don't defend yourself. Moderator doesn't defend yourself from a question unless there's a factual thing. If Gingrich had said, and besides that, you're married to Wadwa, or you went to high school with some factual thing that was wrong, then King would be. But to comment, to respond to a criticism of him, I think the moderator takes it and moves on. And keeping in mind that what I said earlier, I mean, Gingrich the debate is his strategy, and beating up on the press is part of it, another part of his strategy, because he knows, I mean, he can, particularly among Republicans in South Carolina, that's raw meat. And he knows it. He knew it. And frankly, John King knew it. And my criticism of John King is that he played right into whatever, and in fact, affected the outcome of that debate. That first question affected the outcome of that debate and probably helped Gingrich enormously. That was not the intention, obviously. But you see, that's why a moderator has to be very, very careful what he or she does. Because I'm not accusing John King of in any way whatsoever trying to help Newt Gingrich. But that question did help Newt Gingrich. You'd think, well, my God, it would hurt him because it was about this. Well, everybody already knew the story, so it wasn't introducing a story that might have hurt Gingrich. Gingrich could only come back from that, and he came back with a bang and helped himself tremendously, and the polls indicate that. And that's why he's back already, beating up on not in a major way, but beating up on Brian Williams for not letting the audience react to Gingrich's wonderfulness. And
Thank you.
so,
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding Mitt Romney and the Gingrich debate, several of them, why is Mitt Romney not doing as well as perhaps he could be, considering the qualifications that he has and his personality? And if you were to advise him, what would you say you should have done different, and this is what you should do differently now?
ma'am, that's a terrific question. There's no way in the world I'm going to answer it. No, that's a pundit thing. The advice I would give to Mitt Romney, the only advice I give to any candidate or anything, particularly in a debate, the first thing you must always do, and they don't always do this, is answer the question. And then give your explanation. If you want to tell a story about growing up on a farm in upper Minnesota or whatever, don't start with that. If you've been asked about what are we going to do about Iran and the nuclear problem, answer the question and then tell your story. And that would apply to Mitt Romney, but it also apply to everybody else. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, and the question, no, I said it, no, anyhow, about handling questions rather than answering the questions. Remember, when you're on live television in a debate, everybody can see the same thing. And if somebody says, what day is it? Well, that's not the question. The question is, what month is it? No, the question is, what day? That's the only thing I ever want to yell at somebody. I've never done it, and I never will. But when I ask somebody a question and they say, well, that's not the question, Jim. And I say, oh, yes, it is. And I'm going to stay here until you answer it. But I have no specific advice for Mitt Romney. That's not what I do. I don't advise these people.
Yes, ma'am.
You shared it once, I think it was Ford, that realized that he had lost the debate when something was said during a debate. Well, are there any of the candidates that you interviewed after the debates that said, I knew at that moment that I was going to win or I was going to lose?
Walter Mondale told me, he said, look, when that youth thing was said, he said, I was laughing, because you could see it you could see him laughing. He said, I was laughing, but inside I was crying. I knew I had lost the election, not just the debate. I knew I'd lost the election. And I said to him, in my little one-on-one, I said, because I was skeptical of that, frankly. I said, you knew that right then? And he said, yes. And I said, did you tell anybody right then? He said, yes. And I said, who did you tell? He said, I told my wife. He said, I went off the stage and I said, Joan, it's over. He got me. Because here again, what the issue in the first debate, it's back to Clinton's point. Context is everything. the first debate, which Mondale won, beat Reagan in that debate, and because it appeared as if Reagan was losing it. That he lost track of what he was saying. He seemed tired and he seemed old and all of that. And so, oh my God, it seemed like what Mondale had to do was, or Reagan had to do on his own, or Mondale as his opponent had to keep that issue alive in some way, because here again, unspoken. It wasn't an issue, it was a person issue. But Reagan's answer, he was quick, and he put that issue, the main issue that Mondale had against Reagan, it was in the wind, was destroyed by Reagan's performance and that specific comment. That's what Mondale believes, at least, and the pundits, the people who wrote about that election, would agree with that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Do you think the American public is fed up with the money that's being spent in both parties on the election year after year after year? When are we going to go the British way and have 5 weeks with each candidate with the same amount of money? I'd like to hear from both of you on that. Do you think it'll ever happen?
I think when we have a country as small as Britain, with 55 million people and not a presidential system but a parliamentary one, then it'll likely to happen. Short of that, it's not going to happen.
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, but it's a good question.
It is, hell of a question.
Yes.
Hi. I appreciated hearing your opinion of the reason why we have these debates. Could you talk a little bit about how the preparation and the skills and the process of engaging in the debates apply to the actual work of the presidency?
Did you all hear the question there in the back? The question was, who am I pulling for in the Super Bowl? The Patriots or... The answer is
And
the
you are in New England.
The answer is the Patriots. Yeah. But I don't know about Suarez. He's from Brooklyn, so he can speak for himself.
But that's a great question. What does being good at that have to do with being good at being president? Does it have anything to do with being good at being president?
Well,
Or just becoming
here's the deal.
president?
Here's the answer that nobody wants to accept, and I understand why. The fact of the matter is, to be the President of the United States or a candidate for President of the United States in this world that we live in now requires the candidate to be articulate, requires that candidate to be able to think quickly on his or her feet. It requires personality, and in addition to all those other things, like knowing what the issues are and and it is just part of the deal. So a candidate who does poorly in a debate, you say, well, what difference does it make? For instance, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson spoke with a high-pitched voice. Mm-hmm. There's no way in the world he could get the nomination to anything, much less win the election in this kind of world that we live in now. But the ability of somebody to sit in a debate, you judge that person in the way that person can explain what he or she believes, and you hear whether you agree with him or not. You may not agree with him or her, but the way the control that person has and the ability to explain it is critical, because when you get to be president, the president sits down in the Oval Office, looks out at a camera and says, Mr. and Ms. America, I need for you to go ride the bus or whatever. And the American public has got to say, yeah. And here's the reason. And you got to listen. And everybody's got, it's the ability to articulate and is just part of the qualification for president. And the testing of that is the debate. And that goes back to what I said earlier about, particularly in the general election debates. It is, can this person handle him or herself? I mean, how's this person as president going to do on the international stage, so to speak, and talk to the leaders of the free world and the not-so-free world and handle negotiation. All of that sort of stuff is about words. It's about the ability to form a coherent sentence. And I think it's part of the testing. As annoying as it is to people. Some people.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Do you write all your own questions, or do you have a Jim Lehrer editorial board who advises you? And will you be doing your bus call voice before too long?
Well, let's answer the
a
second
two-part
question
question.
first. Yeah. With your permission, I'm going to answer the second question first. But a little bit of just explanation here. As Paul said, I'd worked in a bus depot in the 1950s. I was going to a junior college in South Texas, a place called Victoria. Anybody ever heard of Victoria, Texas? Hey, hey! It's on the Gulf Coast, halfway between Houston and Corpus Christi. And I did work in the bus depot at night as a ticket agent. And one of my jobs was to call the buses, and this is what I did. May I have your attention, please? This is your last call for Continental Trailways, 8:10 p.m., Silverside's air-conditioned through liner to Houston, now leaving from lane 1 next to the building. For Inez, Edna, Ganado, Louise, El Campo, Pierce, Wharton, Hungerford, Candleton, Beasley, Rosenberg, Richmond, Sugarland, Stafford, Missouri City, and Houston. All aboard! Don't forget your baggage, please. And it's terribly relevant to what's going on here today, because that was the first time I was paid money to speak into a microphone. And look what happened. It also proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that if you learn something early, you learn it really well, and it's totally irrelevant, you'll never forget it. Now, what was the first question?
Do you write your questions?
Yes, I write every one of my questions. Because I began as a writer and I'm still a writer, I don't feel I own a question until it goes through my fingers. And sometimes it shows. No, it's, you can't do this by committee. People can give you advice. As a practical matter during the presidential debates, I'm also always worried about the security of a question. I mean, think about what it would be if a candidate or a candidate handler knew in advance that Sammy Sue, moderator, was going to ask a certain question. Well, what I ask people speaking in my case, everybody on the NewsHour staff who's involved in these, I ask for suggestions and research and all that sort of stuff. And then about 5 days before the debate, I end all discussion with everybody. I don't want anybody to be in a position to lie about anything, much less leak anything inadvertently. So I never, ever say to anybody, any human being, here are the questions I'm going to ask. And, let me run these by you, or nothing. I don't want anybody, the only person I do that, only when I do that is at the very end, when I'm really ready to go. I read them, I run them by one person, that's my wife, Kate. And she has suggestions, and of course I take every single one of them. No, but she's there to listen for, to make sure they're apples and apples and oranges, and just to make sure that I haven't gone off on some inadvertent tangent. And but the important thing here is everybody understand that a moderator's questions are, in fact, only person who knows about what those questions are going to be is the moderator. Nobody else is involved. They're not run by the debate commission. Has absolutely nothing, no input at all into what the questions are going to be. And the only thing is negotiated. It's part of the agreement. This debate is going to maybe about domestic affairs. This is going to be about foreign affairs, national security, something like that, but not what the specific questions are.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You've seen a massive number of debates and moderated a fair number. What would you say are the most important debates to watch if you're trying to understand history and presidential campaigns?
Just as in history, I mean,
Yeah.
recent, yeah.
Recent or
Yeah,
non?
yeah. I think that I think, first of all, watch the first Kennedy-Nixon debate, the one in Chicago, 1960, the first of them. There were three. Watch the first one. I would watch the Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter debate when the issue of, it was in San Francisco. I would watch Kerry, George W. Bush, and I would watch the first 45 minutes of Perot, Bill Clinton, and George H.W. Bush. Interesting thing was Paul knows better than anybody, that experiment worked very well. That 45 minutes I talked about earlier, it was really terrific. It had nothing to do with me. They really got it. It was really nifty. It was really good. But it scared the daylights out of every candidate from then on, because you really had to have confidence to do that, to step into a situation where there were no really strict 2-minute, 1-minute, this and that and whatever. And to me, it's always struck me, and I'm speaking way out of school here, but so what? I'm in school, right? I can say that. I mean, I'm close to a school. It shows the kind of the lack of confidence that these candidates have. It's not the candidates, it's the people who are around them. It's got to be 2 minutes and 1 minute because, this other guy is really good and, and all of this. It's all defensive rather than offensive. And these people are a lot better than their handlers believe about them. And they're trying to protect them, and they protect them, I think, they overly protect them, and the candidates should, I think, but when it comes down to, for instance, Dole Clinton, Dole's people insisted, as Paul knows, insisted on these very short answers because he did very good on short things, and Clinton tended to go on and on. So the idea was we'll keep them real short, and that'll really, and Clinton will not do that well, and he'll show him up. In other words, it was all done to put the other, it was all done for their own defensive reasons. But it's understandable, going back to what I said earlier many times, there's so much at risk here, so much at stake. Everybody wants to get the best advantage they possibly can. But that's a lot of airtime, but you can speed ahead if you want to with your remote. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How much time do the candidates give to preparation for the debate? Things like sitting or standing, various kind of formats that it might be, the negotiations that lead up to being on a stage, and what the moderator plays in that.
Moderator's not involved in any of the rehearsals or anything like that. What the candidates, Ray made reference to it earlier, the tradition has been that each candidate goes away and does their own debate prep, and they get friends, political friends, to play the opponent, and somebody plays the moderator. I've had people come up to me and say, "Well, I played you I played you against Bush, or I played you against whatever," and then they try to think things through and imagine what the questions might be, and so they try to help, try to relax, give the candidate a sense of confidence. So and they all do it, and how they do it and the length of time they do it it varies with the candidate.
Have you once handed a format or a schematic of the decided upon way the thing is going to run? Ever said back to the commission, I don't know if that's going to work? Have you ever looked at what's been negotiated with the campaigns and thought, wow, that's going to be hard, or I don't know how that's going to work?
Yes. The whole invitation system, inviting a moderator, is a little bit like the 7th grade prom question. Penelope, if I were to ask you to go to the prom with me, would you go? The debate moderating invitation is, hey, Sammy Sue, if we were to ask you to moderate this debate with these rules, would you do it? The one time when I looked at the rules and I thought, oh my God, how in the world? Because I thought we had moved. Anyhow, it was Kerry George W. Bush. The rules for that debate that turned out very well. That's why I'm so glad I'm so happy about it, because I was able to see a way, because the way the rules were written, it specifically in words, but in rules ruled out follow-ups. It seemed to be, because you had to go to a new question, and then and there was 1 minute or 30 seconds. Well, it was really, really. I looked at that and I thought, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to do this. I'm not sure this is going to work, and I'm not sure this is. But it's take it or leave it. I mean, I never ever said anything to anybody at the commission. Hey, I don't think this is going to work, and why don't you change? I just don't think that's the moderator's role. Moderator is you either do it. If you say you're going to do it, do it. If you don't think you can do it, then don't do it. What I figured out a way that I'm very comfortable with, where I was able to work out a way to do some follow-ups with and stay within the spirit, I thought, of the rules. But it took me a long time to figure it out, and I had I had some second thoughts at the beginning. Once I agreed to do it, oh my God, this is really going to be hard. But I figured out a way to do it, and I was very comfortable doing it.
You get the last question.
Hello.
Hi.
Having spoken to so many different candidates, there must have been some that have had viewpoints that you agree with and some not so much. And earlier in the evening, they said that you are known for your fairness towards the candidates. How, as a journalist, have you remained such a strong integrity to be unbiased over the years? And how hard do you work at that when you're preparing for each debate, and how much do you think about it?
You know, I'm really delighted that you asked me that. The fact is, there are several things involved in this. First of all, it's a matter of function. I'm not there to judge the answers. I'm there to facilitate the answers. And so it's not even in my head. I'm not sitting there, well, this is a stupid thing to say. Or I disagree with this guy's an idiot. You know. I don't even have that kind of stuff in my head. And a lot of it has to do with, in fact, 90% of it has to do with the fact that this is what I've been doing for nearly 50 years. And I decided, there are three very legitimate forms of journalism. Straight news reporting, in other words, what happened. Analysis, analytical journalism, or what does it mean? And then there's opinion journalism, what I think about it, what I think you should think about it, et cetera, et cetera. Each one is very legit. I mean, that's journalism. But they shouldn't be done by the same people. There's straight news people, and then there should be the analyzers, and then there should be the opinion people. I decided 50 years ago that I was going to be in the straight news business, and I've always been in the straight news business. So I've never, ever, ever allowed myself to get into, okay, whatever. And the other thing that happened, for having done it as many years as I've done it, is that I discovered quite early that the more you know about something, the less opinionated you are about it. Seriously. You're a reporter, and you're covering two sides to a major dispute. It can be about anything. Forget politics. It can be about anything. And so in order to do your job as a straight news reporter, you have to talk to the people on one side and really understand why they feel, what they believe, and why they feel that way. And then you go to the other side and you do the same thing. And one of the things that happened to me that shaped me and my attitudes toward all of this, I was fortunate enough. My first job in journalism was as a newspaper man, as a reporter covering the criminal side of the courthouse in Dallas County, Texas. And I would sit there at the press table, and there were a lot of capital punishment cases. They electrified a lot of people back in those days. And I would sit there at the press table in a great criminal trial, murder trial, and the prosecution would put on the case. And I'd sit there and think, oh my God, they ought to take this guy right to Huntsville and fry him. You know, he's guilty. And then the defense would put on the case, and I'd think, oh my God, they've got the wrong guy. And I never, ever, I thought, oh my God, it's how you see things. You know, how you portray things, and it's all gray out there, particularly if you're, and so as a consequence, I learned early on in journalism that things are never quite exactly as cut and dried and as black and white as they appear to be. And that a reporter's job isn't to draw the distinctions, you know, okay, this person's right, this person's wrong, is to put it all out there so people can see the grayness. As well, you know, they can make up their black, but they've got to have the facts first. And then they make a decision, whatever. Well, that's the job I have always done. And so when I sit down to run a presidential debate or interview a Billy Bob Wawa one-on-one, I'm not saying, oh, yeah, that's, you know, for instance, I've been doing this for the NewsHour, say. First of all, it obviously had other names, but I've been doing our daily program for 36 years. And I know there are people who have been watching almost that entire time. And some of them have been waiting breathlessly. Is this the night that Lehrer is going to ask a question of somebody in public, you know, that he's interviewing, and the person's going to give an answer, and I'm going to yell, "Liar!" Never happened.
I missed that night.
Never happened. Never will. I hate to give you a lot, but this is really important stuff to me. I'm glad you asked me that question because it is, and the bottom line is, to answer your question, your final part of your question, the answer, it's easy for me not to involve my opinion in my journalism because that's not what I do. It is a natural thing to me. It's no longer a struggle. Never really was, frankly, but it really isn't now. To struggle with what am I going to do with, how am I going to get my opinion out of this and that? It's not there, and it's a natural thing for me. Thanks for asking your question.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the fine people of Random House, the Kennedy Library, and Mr. Jim Lehrer himself all hope you'll buy a copy of Tension City, which is conveniently available for purchase outside, and you could even get it signed, because you know the guy. Thank you for coming tonight. Please thank Jim Lehrer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.